Good afternoon, everyone. I just wanted to say, as you know, that Beth Noel will not be with us. She's had a significant loss in the family, and I want to thank Caitlin for stepping in today. So Caitlin, I'll turn the reins over to you, and then you can turn it back to me.
Awesome, thank you. Welcome to today's critical conversation, and thank you for joining us. I'm Caitlin Buckley, and will be your moderator. President Sisson will start us off with some updates. During today's presentation, chat will be disabled so that we can focus on the information being shared. If during the presentation you think of a question, please feel free to jot it down. Once the presentation is ended, we'll move into a Q&A period. At that time, chat will be open and you can raise your hand to ask questions. You can also type your questions into the chat box. Questions will be read aloud and we'll address as many as the time permits in the order they were received. Now on to you, Phil.
Thanks, Caitlin. Really appreciate it. And thanks for stepping in today. As always, really appreciate your help in moderating this. Folks, great to see you this afternoon. Thanks so much for taking some time. We have a lot of information to present, and I want to leave some time for questions for a lot of you. We're going to try and do the juxtaposition between what's happening here locally at MCC and the exciting renovations and construction projects all around you, and talk a little bit more about how that has impacted folks and how it will impact folks in the future, but more importantly, what we really hope we'll be able to do for our students. And I also want to make sure that we can focus in on a couple of reminders here first, that obviously here's all the dates for all the critical conversations, and hopefully we will have the NETCHI site visit report to do the follow-up. So Tuesday, November 26th could be a combination of either the website and the NETCHI site report follow-up, or one or the other, and we'll keep you posted on this topic since we had to punt a little bit for this particular topic today. But those are all the dates, so please just have those on your calendar. And if you want to go back and take a look at any of the previous critical conversations and hear the presentations or people's question and answer period, then you can visit the website for all the past recordings at www.middlesex.mass. Open house piece, the ability to see the critical conversations is all on the President Town Hall site there. Also want to remind folks how appreciative we are of your comments and thoughts and ideas, and those get expressed sometimes through Open Door Days. So here are the dates that we fluctuate back and forth to Bedford and Lowell, and can really accommodate you the best that we can. And we'll even try and accommodate you if you need to walk in that day as opposed to making an appointment. But we love to hear from you. It gives me a chance to really know what you're thinking and some of the reactions to things that are happening on campus. So please don't hesitate to do that. We're going to jump right in today. I want to first do a great big thank you to our facility staff for the amazing work that they do over the summer. And that happens every summer where there's a real opportunity for projects to be taken care of. But more importantly, it was a real heavy lift this summer with a number of significant projects that the college has invested in. And so what I wanted to do is chronologically take you through some updates about those current summer projects that are wrapping up, that are sort of, as Pat would say, in the rearview mirror, but that we'll be able to really experience, and students and faculty and staff will be able to experience. And then we're going to pivot to an opportunity to talk about what we see is coming from the Executive Office and the Secretary of Education in terms of capital projects, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. I'm going to move through some slides pretty rapidly because they really refer to other institutions, but I wanted you to have the full presentation of the quarterly report from the Secretary of Education, because there's some critically important information in that does have impact on the college. And then we're going to circle back in the third phase of this to talk about sort of what are the projects that we have identified for funding in the future for Middlesex, and to give you a heads up about that and what our thoughts are in terms of how those bond projects usually play out. And we've got some historians here and we've got some new people, so it's a great mixture of the thought process that have brought us here. So I'm going to turn this over to Patrick and Allie to really go over the summer project updates and how they were financed. And then I will jump back in and go over sort of the presentation from the Secretary of Education. So Pat?
Sure. Thanks, Phil. What I'm going to do is I'm actually going to kick it over to Ally to start off because she has a trustees finance committee meeting that's going to be happening concurrently here. So she's going to take care of some of this on the financial end of things right at the outset, and then we'll go into just some visuals with what some of the projects were.
Sure. Good afternoon, everyone. What you see in front of you is a majority of projects that have been completed over the summer, with exception to the Cowan Center and the Henderson project, which are kind of in progress. But what we wanted to point out to the college community here are all the major capital projects that have been ongoing. Coming up, well, ongoing right now until September of next year, we have a Cowan Center capital project going where we're updating the air handling unit. We're doing an entire new roof, and we'll be working on some of the accessibility issues on the front entrance. That's going to be about a $4.9 million job. We're using deferred maintenance state funds for it, and pairing that with ARPA air quality funds we had received in the pandemic. Next up is the Derby nursing renovation, which is basically through completion. If you haven't seen it, it's a gorgeous, gorgeous, gorgeous piece of real estate. It's so beautiful, the labs. That cost us $3.4 million. It was designated partially by the college undesignated funds, but a lot of these major projects get started with grants that we're seeking out based on, you know, workforce needs and what Daniel's group is doing. And we're finding grants with substantial values. And that was the case for the Derby nursing project, which kind of got this project off the ground. If you're in Bedford, we replaced the campus center roof for about $2.9 million. It is in its final stages, and that one actually came under budget by about $50K, so not hugely under budget, but that roof went up quick, and we had great contractors working on that project. We did a fire alarm replacement and a fire pump replacement in a variety of buildings in and around Bedford. These were all funded by deferred maintenance funds, and kind of how we allocate that fund is when we look at deferred maintenance and what we should tackle, we really look at priority based on our facilities assessment conditions. And so obviously having proper fire alarms and pumps in place is obviously high priority. That project happened over the summer, and it really, the fire alarm replacement happened 4 months ahead of schedule, which was amazing. Henderson, the biotech renovations, you will see it kick off. I know we've talked about this one for quite some time, but I think they started fencing some of Henderson off. So that project you'll really see being kicked off shortly. That too was funded by a variety of grants, public and private, and matched by the college designated funds. It's totaling right now just under $7 million, and the split between the funding is, you know, half grants and half college designated. We're working on the scheduling for that. I'll let Pat talk to that, but scheduling on that to make sure that disruptions are as minimal as possible. The Bedford House is no longer, as you all see, if you look out the window and you're in Bedford, and we replaced the house, Bedford House, with an amphitheater, which should be almost ready for use. We're just protecting the grass that they planted, but I believe the fences came down this week. But that project cost us about $1.1 million, and it actually came in $200,000 under budget. And then lastly, I think I'm seeing the whole slide here. We have the North Academic roof. That was the roof, I believe it was over the concert hall, and that was $150,000. We used deferred maintenance money on it, and that also came in under budget. So a lot of big changes happening over the summer. And I think what's important from a financial perspective is just to know that we're trying to pair money as best we can, using the state's deferred maintenance, our own designated funds to really support academic programming where needed, and then you know, any other grants, ARPA funds, nursing pathways grant, skills capital grant. These are all major grants that have really helped seed some of these bigger projects. So I'll stop there.
Alrighty, Thanks, Ally.
Yep.
I'm trying to move the slide forward here. There we go. So as folks, some of you may have seen these photos over the course of other presentations we know with the Board of Trustees. But it took us 7 months just to do the remediation for the building and only 2 days for the house itself to come down. So I know the folks who used to call that house home were sad to see it go, but I got to tell you, it came down with basically little to no effort, 2 days in August. So the other part of it was what we had waiting in the wings. And like Ally said, doing what we did to build the amphitheater directly on the heels of the demolition saved us a couple $100,000. So some of you may recognize the entrances of the doors or see some of the old books that were left there in some of the bathtubs that were up on the second floor there. But that's a couple of the pictures from the 2-day demolition job. And then we began moving in these the granite slabs over the course of about a week, which were installed through August and September. Excuse me. And they did the grading to make the site ADA accessible. What they did was they've seeded all around the back of the amphitheater and all down up towards north. The fences are up. They're coming down by the Friday of this week. Comically, the facilities has been working overtime in the past week with some help from Bedford VA veterans for the record number of oak leaves, which seem to have fallen on our property this year. They've got bags and bags and bags of them. They're out there today doing it to get the leaves off the area because they want to get the seeds exposed. But here's the new amphitheater, which is going to be it's in R25. Dwayne has helped us get it queued up for booking in R25. It can be used as a classroom. It can be used as event space, can be used as study space, but it's only bookable for one event at a time. So we can't block it for a whole semester. But if anybody wants to do a class there, they're able to go in through R25 and designate it for the week prior if they want to hold one of the classes. Technically, the official seating capacity is between 32 and 36 on those slabs you see there. But if you can see the green space behind it and there's slopes on both sides of it, you can fit significantly more amounts of people into that area. There will be, Karen Oster has already gone over and she's cut her eyeballs looking at some potential Shakespeare in the Park opportunities here come the good weather. So I know that the wheels are turning on that one. Which brings us over to what Ally had referred to, what's been happening over in the Derby building, which is going to be renamed our Health Center in the coming weeks here. This was a everybody's foot on the gas, all hands on deck project that has been going on for several months, but it began with the removal of the bookstore from the ground floor of the Derby building, as well as the law center from the second floor, which moved down here to Bedford into Henderson Hall. So as you can see, Arlene and Karen Townsend, and kudos to Susan LaValle and Sharon Hamill, who basically spent their entire summer trying to take care of a lot of the details for this property to get it ready for us, which you'll see. This was the pictures you're looking at here are midsummer. And I'm showing these because the contrast of what you're going to see coming up, that's what the shells of the rooms look like in July, August, and into almost the beginning of September. The group over there on the right there that are moving the beds in was a Seinfeld or Friends sketch in progress, with a lot of pivoting to get those 18 beds up the flights of stairs. And it took 6 people to do each of the beds. It was no easy task, but once they did get them up there and locked into these spaces, you'll see they're in their new home on the, this is the second floor option. And then there are beds as well down on the first floor. This is now the new ground floor lobby of the Derby building. This is what's, if you look in the background on the bottom left picture, that's Derby Park behind it. And that's Middle Street out on the left. That's what folks see if they look into our building. That's a student lounge area that's been built. Actually, Phil, some new accent rugs were added there yesterday on the underneath those tables. So that's even a newer development. And the group of photos and the bubbles on the right, those are alums of the program that our faculty can tell you who they all are. They pretty much know where almost all of them work. And if you know any of them, give them a shout out to let them know they're on that alumni wall. But it really has transformed that front-facing space dramatically. And these are some of our new inhabitants on the first and second floor. I don't know if they've all received names yet, but they've got 18 different beds that are in place. And I know that Sue and Sharon spent professional day with their nursing faculty going through a training with Laerdal on these simulation mannequins. They've got infants, they've got elderly, they've got pregnant mannequins. They've got significant amounts of new upgrades on this with a control room in the back that has to be seen to be believed. And I'm sure that, you know, when we get to the open mic part of this, you'll hear from some of the folks that are over there. So kudos to them and to the faculty. If I understand it correctly, last Tuesday, they began some of the actual classroom work with students using these new simulation centers. So bravo all around to folks that were able to get this one over the goal line. And stay tuned, there will be a ribbon cutting in the imminent future here. I think everybody just has some crazy schedules that we've been trying to match up, but we do have something intended for the coming weeks. And Phil, that would bring it back to you for the statewide update.
Perfect. Thanks, Ali and Pat. And I just want to reemphasize something that's really important here from the initial slide that Ali went over, is that all of these projects, or a great number of these projects, have been in many ways faculty driven, from the idea that we have opportunity to expand and create for the first time our practical nurse program, which means that we needed a larger simulation space. And so there's a lot of changes that are happening in that area, but, you know, we are at a time when a lot of other community colleges and institutions, universities, and state U's across the spectrum across the country are cutting programs. We here at Middlesex are expanding, and we're expanding the physical space and making space better and making the learning spaces better for students in a variety of areas. I do want to mention the funding source that Ali talked about in terms of deferred maintenance. Has been a change in the way the state provides deferred maintenance monies to us. We have, and I will show you that slide, a significant amount of money because of need in deferred maintenance, because we have some older buildings, and that's in many ways how Middlesex was built and how it's grown up over time. The state has never really found a way to manage that deferred maintenance for all 29 of its public institutions, and it's something that the presidents and others really speak about a great deal, is the fact that some campuses are really crippled by deferred maintenance. What we've been able to do is do some real reinvestment and to be able to use money that we receive from the state for that deferred maintenance. And you'll see a slide about that as well, with projects ongoing, such as things that are not necessarily things that may be attractive, but they're really important, like the roofs that we've been able to do and the fire pumps, and the opportunity to really do the demolition on Bedford. All happened because we had access to state dollars, and a lot of the other projects that were driven by grant funds that faculty and deans and our provost, Arlene Rodriguez, helped to really move forward, thanks to the work that's done by our grants area. So this has really been a community project to really upgrade a lot of these facilities, and we have a lot more to do. So I want to try and talk a little bit about sort of a report. If you'll take it back one slide, Caitlin, just the picture of the State House is a good place to start. So on a quarterly basis, Ali, Pat, and I receive a briefing from the Secretary of Education, the Executive Office of Education, and the Division of Capital Asset Management and Maintenance, or DCAM, which you hear us talk about all the time. And this September presentation is rather significant because it does outline some of the efforts at the state level to really address not only deferred maintenance, but facilities projects across the system. This is pretty important because it's got a couple of new and innovative pieces in it that I wanted you to be aware of. And again, these slides will be available to you. I'm not going to cover everything in all the slides, but I wanted you to have the complete presentation so you had a complete picture here. If you want to go to the next. So this is the agenda that we receive each time that we have one of these quarterly. Go back one slide, Caitlin. It identifies not only the secretary gets a chance to talk to us, Secretary Tutwiler, who oversees both the Department of Elementary and Secondary Ed and, of course, the Department of Higher Ed. And there is a conversation usually around the work that they're doing around what's happening with fair share dollars, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. They're going to talk in this presentation. I will give you a sense of EO 623 and the Affordable Homes Act and why that's important to us, and also the critical repairs that people are doing with the fair share spending. But more importantly, the discussion about a bond bill for support for higher education based on some facility conditions assessments that were done that we took part in, a utilization study and the decarbonization roadmaps, and why Middlesex is in such a good position now based on the work that we've done. So as we start looking at this area, the Fair Share Capital Working Group was an opportunity to bring together and talk about new sources of capital to really help higher education transform its physical facilities, and options for being able to figure out, when we do have capital dollars, how to address that those capital dollars get deployed to the different 29 public institutions, considering how much need there is across the system. So there's been a working group that identifies its working group members there. From the Secretariat of Administration and Finance, Education. There is something called the Massachusetts Climate Chief, who is really looking at the idea of decarbonization and the requirements that the governor has set forth for the climate issue in the state of Massachusetts. The Commissioners, Higher Education and the Capital Asset Management, people from the Higher Education and Bonding area, the joint committees, and representatives from all of the schools. So there's a representative from the community colleges, a representative from UMass, and the state universities, and a couple of other systems. But as you can see, what they're trying to talk about is what's a financing structure that would be able to use fair share revenues to be able to support the debt that we have in higher education and for higher education capital for the future, a level of funding that could support new sources of capital, because this is a problem. It's not part of the state's budget. And when we start talking about deferred maintenance and others, there are limited resources. And how that would be distributed across the higher education system, because everyone has needs, and an opportunity to talk about a legislative package, including a bond bill that will be really important now that we have fair share dollars to be able to support the physical facilities that we have on all of our campuses. So that's the challenge. They've been talking a lot about the fact that in the 1970s was when most of our campuses were built. We have aging buildings. We certainly have had presidents here who have been entrepreneurial. Certainly when I think of Carol Cowan and her entrepreneurial effort to really identify older buildings in the city of Lowell and renovate them. Every campus they know is different. And so there are some campuses that have unistructures, one buildings, and then there are campuses with multiple buildings. It's also happening in an environment when construction costs are through the roof. That we are really having additional pressures that we are seeing in some of the places, flat or declining enrollment, and in the community colleges, an area of growth, obviously, since we have identified Mass Reconnect and Mass Educate as a strategy for enrollment at the community colleges, and that these investments are issues that are going to not necessarily be possible unless we take some really bold action here. And so this working group has talked about that challenge. They've also identified really a lot of, they've been meeting pretty regularly. They're, if you go to the next slide, they're meeting in September, October, November, and December, and they have objectives for each of those meetings. So they've set out to really discuss some of the challenges around this, as was noted in the previous slide, how this is an expensive venture and that this fair share dollars may be a good way to solve some of the problem, looking at a financing structure that would be fair and equitable, and some options about how they might distribute and allocate the resources that they would get from those fair share bond bill, and then the direct work about policy and authorization discussion to inform sort of a bond bill and do a final report. So there's a policy proposal in December that's going to go in the governor's budget, a potential bond bill filing, and to really get ahead of that for March of 2025.
Wait 1 second, hold on.
Scott, you may just want to, there you go. Thank you. Next slide. The other piece that's happening in the state, as you well know, is Massachusetts is in a housing crisis. And as many of you have ever tried to either buy a house or maintain a rental facility anywhere in the state of Massachusetts, many people are moving into New Hampshire, but we're seeing the cost of housing soar. And this executive order that was created by the governor identifying the opportunities for the use of surplus and underutilized land for housing. And in our master facilities plan, you will see that we have articulated on our Bedford campus 3 or 4, I think there's 4, parcels of land and possibilities for some form of housing. And of course, this will be some of the conversations that we've already had with DCAM and that we will continue to have, and that we'll be having with the city of Bedford next week. So this is an area of exploration, and you're going to see these conversations happening. They're happening now at Mass Bay and at Middlesex based on surplus land, and an opportunity to figure out how we might be able to use some of the resources we would receive from that land to be able to meet our other decarbonization goals and facilities goals of the college. Also aligns with the legislative authority to from the housing bond bill, which is a significant investment on the part of the state to really build affordable housing across the state and as many units as possible. And that there's been a lot of discussion about relief of local zoning. So a lot of those towns and cities that are affiliated with having MBTA stops and public transportation are important, and Bedford is one of those areas. This is the deferred maintenance piece that we talk a lot about. There was a lot of new study that they had to go through. They had to update that study in October. They looked at some approval from the Mass Historical Commission, building owner records, the resources and requirement, the climate resiliency study, and of course, wetlands considerations in each of those projects. And they've been through a lot of this process here with us at Middlesex, and that's been part of our master plan so that we have clear alignment with the new study certifications. You can see the deferred maintenance dollars and percentages that have been spent. So the distribution of $250 million over 5 years. So when you see deferred maintenance on the chart that Ali mentioned to you earlier, that is our slice of the pie for deferred maintenance. And you'll see that they shows you down the bottom that scale about how quickly people are spending down. This has a lot to do with third-party vendors. It has a lot to do with construction projects. So you'll notice that for us, there's about 21% here that is located about this. We have the spend down time until June of 2026. So that's why it's important for us to jump on these roof projects and other projects that can really help with our deferred maintenance that's significant. Next slide. This is the fair share spending update in terms of what we've been talking about. And of course, this is what we did, a lot of the work that we did to make sure that we were able to begin the decarbonization project that has to do with the demolition of Bedford House and some of the other projects that are tied to that. This was $50 million over a 1 fiscal year with a spending timeline. It must be completed by June 30th of 2025. So again, a lot of this is stuff that's spending to date and under contract, and you can see that the percentages and how community colleges, the UMass system, and the state universities are moving through that process as well. Next slide. So very early on in this process, along with our master facilities plan, we were very quickly, as were all the institutions, asked to do a facilities condition assessment. And to look at exactly what were the conditions of some of our buildings, what was the backlog in terms of the monies that could have been received from the state, and what it would cost to make those renovations now per square foot. And you can see those numbers at the top there in that slide. They've talked a lot about what's going on with the UMass system here and essentially the backlog, but you see each of the different sectors, UMass, the State U's, and the community colleges, and just exactly the significant amount of deferred maintenance across the entire 29 campuses. Next slide. And you can see this 10-year backlog for the community colleges here and where we fit in that slide. And you can see sort of middle of the pack there. Springfield Tech, $250 million. We're right around the point of about close to $88 million of deferred maintenance in terms of a 10-year backlog of what needs to be done to any of our buildings to keep them up to snuff. So that's why in our facilities master plan, you will see an effort to actually decommission some buildings, such as Bedford House and South Academic, those buildings that really are not in great shape, don't have access for students, and really are things that we need to just take off the drawing board in terms of figuring out how we might be able to better invest our money in those facilities that are that can be renovated and will be renovated in a way that would be meaningful for the use for students and for faculty. This shows you sort of over the 10 years by square footage what it would cost, and that at that square footage price now at $188 per square foot, that number will only continue to increase. So again, the crisis here is that not enough deferred maintenance to take care of what all the 29 institutions need that are public higher education institutions, and the fact that we've seen that square footage amount for any kind of construction project increase significantly. And so we're at a point now, it's the more that we can take fair share dollars in a bond bill to really resolve a lot of our issues for buildings that need to be renovated, buildings that need to be built, is all part of why this bond bill is so important, because we're racing against time in terms of construction costs. Next slide. So this shows you where the state universities are. This may or may not be of interest to you, but you can see that Bridgewater and Salem are, again, older campuses that need significant renovation. Next slide. You can also see where they are with their 10-year backlog, and they are currently at $159 per square foot for their facilities conditions and what needs to be changed, because you'll find that in a lot of cases, some of these campuses have much newer buildings than the community colleges, so that you can see why it will be more expensive to really address the issue at the community colleges. These enrollment trends were shared. There was another meeting with the Department of Higher Ed just recently about it. You will see that it is really the community colleges that are an upward trend with the tuition fee programs that boosted our enrollment over the past couple of years between Mass Transfer and Mass Educate, which is really important. But you also see the demographic cliff that's looming in 2026 for the number of high school graduates in Massachusetts, and how that's going to impact specifically the state universities and UMass. So why have the presidents and everyone been working so hard towards Mass Reconnect and Mass Educate? Is because that enrollment growth is going to be so critical to our stabilization over the next few years in terms of how we survive and thrive as a community college system. Next slide. So this is really a utilization study that was sort of handed to us as well in terms of another project to identify the high-level utilization of the 29 higher education institutions with 33 sites on classroom labs and offices, and how much we are using that space. And that was all part of our master facilities plan. So again, we were well ahead of the game on this. But they are working with all 29 public higher education institutions to get up to speed about the utilization of space. So this is about efficiency of space. This is about scheduling. And again, I just want to give kudos to all of you and the work that we've done here to have a master facilities plan in place with all of this data that really allows us to be prepared to respond to the needs that we get from DCAM as they're requesting this information. Next slide. And again, I just point out, again, for us, if you look at this slide, it identifies that we are one of the few institutions that have both a master plan and the decarbonization projects underway or completed. You'll see Mass Maritime, Middlesex Community College, and Westfield State is currently in process with their master plan. And so it does position us very well in terms of where you see where all the other community colleges are that are way behind in the process or that are just beginning, like Holyoke or Northern Essex or North Shore are just starting their master planning. And of course, whether or not they will be in line for decarbonization will be important. But we should feel good about where we are in this process with the state, because the master plan is completed. We have a plan for both campuses, and we have a decarbonization plan for every single one of our buildings that currently exist. So kudos to us for being in the right place at the right time when this bond bill is available to us. Next slide. So I'm not going to stop here to take any questions. I think we'll kind of wait till the end, but I just wanted to give you a sense of where we are in comparison to many other institutions and why the master facilities plan and our efforts there have been so important, why it's been so important for us to spend down this deferred maintenance dollars so that we can make sure that we take the allocation that we receive from the state and then take this to the next level. So I'm going to turn the process back over to Pat, who's going to talk a little bit about our bond bill preparedness and what we've done to really communicate what our needs here for small and medium-sized projects and larger projects in the years to come. So Pat?
So I just wanted to give some quick kudos because, talk about coincidental timing, but the state just reached out to me today. They're looking for some more of that data collection that Phil was referring to. And Kayla Karen and her folks down in the registrar's office, as well as Ryan Johnson and his IR team, have been critically important for us to turn around some of these data requests that the state is looking for. And I know that the requests sometimes seem hefty and it feels like a big ask on top of the jobs that people are doing as their regular days. But the fact that we're able to get this information processed so quickly is really what's helped positioned us in our response time for this data information. So thanks to all who've gotten the emails and have responded to them. I'd like to say we're done with them, but I can guarantee you there's more to come, including probably when I hang up from this call, I'm going to send you today's request. But thanks for the quick processing on that. So, Allie, I don't know, because I know you've got to jump. If you want to take this slide and then I'll carry it forward on the rest of the bond bill setup.
Sure. So just to kind of piggyback on Phil's presentation, in the state doing a facilities condition assessment on all their state buildings in higher education, they can ascertain, what's outstanding for deferred maintenance, but also as we look at master plans and being smart about the usage of the building. And so we got a request from the state or the Division of Capital Assets Management and Maintenance to really come up with a list of projects that are more better utilization of facilities and more programmatic needed than they are deferred maintenance, and to try to tack on an estimate dollar value to what those projects would be to come up with the next bond bill. And a bond bill would be in the hundreds of millions and would perpetuate over a length of time. So the state used community colleges and UMass's could really get some bigger projects done. And so they asked us to group them into kind of three tranches here. A small project would really be programmatic changes, 3,000 to 5,000 square feet. A medium-sized project is program relocations. Now, this was just guidelines about 5,000 to 1,500 square feet. And then larger projects, bigger renovations, new buildings, renovations, things of that nature. And so Pat and I worked together to kind of come up with some ideas based on our master plan, based on our decarbonization plan, based on the facilities condition assessment that we've had done to come up with some of these projects. And the goal is to have this data. The state wants to have this data collected to have a policy to inform a bond bill by this December. So Pat, or Caitlin rather, if you'd go to the next slide.
So,
Go
okay,
ahead.
I can take it from there. I'm going to give folks a little bit of a history, Allie, as you're well aware. The last time one of these bond bills came around for higher education was in 2006. And so the bond bill conversation and the data collection happened in 2006, 2007. The bill itself was issued in 2008. And in that version of the bill, Middlesex was in there for $45 million for 3 projects. One was for $11 million for new arts center in Lowell. One was for $10 million for a brand new building in Lowell. And the third one was for $24 million for a STEM building in Bedford. So of those 3, the only one we actually got the money on was the $11 million for the art center, which still didn't fund the entire project, because by the time construction began and everything was underway, there was significant appreciation, which went several million above that 11. The $24 million that was slated for the STEM building here in Bedford, we were 10 months into a study for that building that was being done with Icon Architecture when the administration changed at the governor's office, and the new administration wiped out all of the pending projects. we had offered to pay the remaining 96,000 to get our study over the goal line, so it was considered shovel ready, but it was not allowed and the projects were scuttled. So this is really only the second time, I can say this century, one of these has come along. They're looking at least a $2 billion bond bill coming forward. So what Ally did reference, and Phil, we had some good chuckles over this, is we got this request on a Wednesday morning while I was sitting in PLC, and they needed our submission by the following Monday. So the fact that were able to have so much of the work already done through the master plan, we kind of went right to those reference documents to come up with some of these suggestions. So what you're going to see here on the ensuing slides that are going to follow is a total of 113 million that we have submitted for consideration in this next bond bill. Now I want to set expectations real low so that we can achieve well beyond them, because the viability of us getting all 113 million of that might be bleak, but we're certainly going to make our best efforts for it. So we had to break things up, like Ally said, into the significant, the three categories. So if you can just, I mean, it's spelled out there in the chart, but the two at the major levels one was for the Cowan Center, and then the other is for an extension of Henderson Hall. So I'm going to actually move into some of the slides, and we can come back to those data reference points. But I want to just show you that on the medium request, we're looking at an upgrade. I know Carmen's on the call, so she can scream loudly on mute here that we're looking at a concert hall upgrade up in North Academic, as well as repurposing Trustees House, which is building number 4, for another 13 million. And then for the folks who work up in Talbot and over in Marie's neck of the woods, we are looking at upgrades in the area of between $3 and $5 million each for the laboratories and renovations and upgrades on floors 2, 3, and 4. So again, these are the reference points of the Cowan. What's really significant here, and it's going to come into play with some of the other slides and some of the work you're seeing going on even as we speak, is 7 to 8 years ago, we did an accessibility study and a review of every single one of our properties to see what was current, what was ADA compatible. And so one of the major projects that we're looking at here is to make the front of Cowan more accessible, as well as the back patio coming off the cafeteria. So the Cowan project is going to be working towards those upgrades, and the Henderson Hall project, to simplify it, it's if you looked at it from above, it looks like the letter L. Phil's plan here, if all goes like accordingly, is that the letter L will become a letter C, and we will be bringing an extension of the building out off of that left-hand side of the building into the quad up by Lisa's. Or is it up there on the what do you call that? The solarium there up on the
Greenhouse.
What is it? A greenhouse. There you go. Thank you. Bringing that out into the quad to make Henderson Hall look like the letter C, allowing us to expand our STEM programs and really fitting the #1 recommendation of our master plan to make Henderson Hall a life sciences building, which is what's been happening. And I know a lot of you have been chipping in. Chris Algara has been doing nothing but working on this for months here to bring his programs over into Henderson. We still got a long road to go on that. Some of you, especially those of you on the back side of the building, may have noticed this occurring yesterday and today. This is the demolition of that back entrance that was really no longer compliant on the ADA, especially with the railings were in poor shape. The fact that we've got the weather on our side under these 60 and 80 degree days allows us to save some money by doing this work now, as opposed to at the other end of the project, which we would run into delays, especially in the winter. So that back staircase was demolished. That photo is from yesterday, and I can tell you, even from today, there's been significant significant damage or demolition done on that stretch. Here's the aforementioned concert hall and Trustees House. The recommendation of the master plan was to raise Trustees House. We still have a lot to talk about and to figure out whether or not that's where we end up with this conversation. But what is for certain is that we have to repurpose it to make the space better utilized if there's anything that's going to exist on the other side of this. Because when the numbers came back for the utilization from the utilization study, it was woefully underused, and they recommended that it be demolished. We had done in 2009 the installation of some geothermal heat pumps there. So we're trying to figure out a way to save those pumps and still repurpose them, or to keep them in use for something that might come in the place if the building were to be raised. So stand by for further conversations on that. But on the left of the screen, you'll see there's a lot of damage in the back passageways of that concert hall. You can see some of the paint chips from above, and in the vestibule behind the practice area. But one of our intended goals, top of the list here, is to rip out all of those circa 1970s chairs, if you will, or whatever year they were installed, in the benches, and get an actual brand new acoustic friendly theater built into that space for the concert hall. Okay, and then this is the last one, some of the smaller ticket items on updating the laboratories over in Talbot 2, 3, and 4. That's essentially the whole right-hand side of the building above the behind the elevators and to the left of the elevator section. There is already right now underway a very significant project going on in Talbot on the 3rd floor. So kudos to Karen Townsend and her dental hygiene folks, who were able to get us a perfect score and an unbelievable glowing accreditation while living in temporary digs over in the Pollard building when the accreditors came a few weeks back. Was that September? I've lost track here now, because everything happened at the same time. But they were able to, we got them set up in temporary homes over in Pollard, but now we are in the process. Our facilities folks just did a significant amount of demolition up on Talbot 3. And so they've gutted the whole left side of the building where the nursing simulation lab used to be. And Sharon has moved all of that material over into the new health building on the other side of Derby Park. So Talbot 3 now is ripe for redevelopment for the dental hygiene program. But the bond bill requests we've made were specifically for these labs that you're seeing here on the screen, which I believe are original to 1994 when we first moved into those. I don't think we've had any upgrades to them in the 30 years since they were installed. And Phil, I think
that should be it.
Right?
Yeah.
That's it.
So I just want to mention this does not mean all these projects, obviously, as Pat has mentioned, it's good for us to manage our expectations, but it's really important for us to have these projects out there and identified, that we will not receive the 113 plus million, but at least we are thinking big about the renovations that need to happen and align with the college's master plan. I will, note that in the larger project that we talked about in Bedford for the new Henderson Hall wing, to turn that building into a C, it might even connect over with academic resources, but it would include the renovations of all the labs that are currently in Henderson Hall as well, as we know that that's a priority too. So that's why that price tag of 44 million for that is a very important one. And in fact, it's very important based on probably a priority based on our master plan in terms of what we want to do in both Lowell and Bedford. So those two major requests come directly, in essence, from the college's master facility plan, with plenty of documentation for an argument. And now what we would need is just architectural renderings, and that will be the next step that we will involve folks in as we start to talk about what could be the future of both Henderson Hall and some of the Cowan Center improvements. So we've thrown a lot of information at you. Allie, I know you have to jump off to go to a finance committee meeting, and I have to join you, but I wanted to start by opening this up for questions and turning it back over to Caitlin to sort of moderate that. And I would encourage people that if you have questions that are finance-related questions, that perhaps we could use Allie's expertise while she's still with us for a few minutes before she has to jump. So ask those questions first, if they're prompted and in your mind, and we'll certainly continue. I also want to make mention of one other thing that should not, the Classroom Refresh group has become really embodied the sort of the master facilities plan, and the two have become one in terms of a driving force. We are still investing in refreshing our classrooms and spaces used by students. So that will continue. Those are operational dollars that we will continue to invest to continue to do the great work that that Judy Hogan and Deb Bacher has been leading for some time now, to really renovate our classrooms so that they are more user-friendly and certainly more efficient, and also a lot more attractive in terms of not only seating, but sort of the technology and what we need in those classrooms. So thank you, Judy and Deb, for that. And that work will continue regardless of the rest of this funding. That's institutional dollars that we're going to continue to invest. Questions?
I just had one come in from the chat.
Great.
A lot of students are using the library as a space to not just study and work, but to also hang out, which we love. But at least weekly, when we're telling students we're closing, we get asked if there's a place on campus where they can go. Are there any conversations or plans to give students a place to go between when we close the library at 4:30 to when evening classes start at 6?
Yeah, it's a great question. And in fact, there's two explanations to that. One is that most common spaces, depending on where you are. So a lot of our students will use the cafeteria in both spaces, and that spaces are available, including the student lounge. There's a student lounge that's accessible to students in both buildings. And the other piece that we'd say is that we are probably in the beginning stages of having conversations with the library about additional staff to be able to meet the growing demand for additional evening hours, that sort of hour before a lot of our evening classes. We're beginning to see our adult students come back because of Mass Reconnect. We're seeing a schedule that would require us to do more in terms of making sure that we have on-campus facilities for students to hang out, study, etc. So the libraries could continue to play part of that role if we had the right staffing there to be able to accomplish that, but along with some other public spaces. So we have to continue to have that conversation as the Mass Reconnect and the over 25 or students that are taking evening classes that are on campus continues to grow. And I think it's not just that space. I think it's spaces not just in those buildings, but also much like the study space that you saw for the health building over where the simulation is, that, you know, we're spread out and we have to be able to identify potentially some student space besides hallway space that's available in all of our academic buildings to be able to accommodate the time between when the library or other facilities close down and students are taking classes for evening. So it's going to be one of our challenges moving forward as we have more and more of our students on campus, which is exciting. It's just how we have to learn how to reinvest our money and think about how do we serve adult students better now that we're seeing more and more of them return. It's a great question.
I have a couple more. Considering the boosted enrollment with Free Community College, is there confidence in the number of classrooms that we will have on both campuses after remaining building demolitions happen?
Yeah, actually, our utilization for our buildings is really low. So if you go to the facilities master plan, you will see pages upon pages of studies of how our buildings are used. Now, I will say from the time that we started that master plan to some of the work that we've been doing now, we're going to get a better picture of space utilization. But some of what has to happen is we've got to continue to spread out our schedule. I know the registrar and the academic deans and the provost have been encouraging people to understand that, yes, a good population of folks are going to come to us between 8 in the morning and 1 o'clock in the afternoon. But we have highly underutilized space in the early afternoon and even in the late afternoon. And again, very underutilized space across many, many buildings for evening classes. So part of this is a scheduling challenge, right? Along with that, it's the balancing act of what's available to students synchronously and asynchronously for online courses. So as you well know, post-COVID, a significant number, I think if you looked at it now, it's probably about 48 or 49% of our courses are offered online. So it is that combination of scheduling that's more challenging, meeting the needs for all students. Will we have all the classes that we need simultaneously at the 9 o'clock hour? That will be a challenge, which means that we have to identify how do we really work the schedule to be able to accommodate that. But I will tell you, we're not going to be adding buildings or expanding buildings for a 4-hour space of time between 9 o'clock and 1 o'clock, 9 in the morning till 1 p.m. So we have to be able to show by what we're doing for decarbonization and everything else, that the lights don't need to stay on everywhere, that not everywhere needs to be heated, and that we have to utilize the space that we currently have and become more efficient at it. So we're going to have to keep looking at utilization reports. So if you hear about that, that will be happening, and you'll be having discussions in department meetings and at your division meetings, because a lot of that information is available, but it's not information that we've been utilizing to develop a schedule that really is as efficient as it possibly can be. So I think it's going to be a challenge as we continue to constrict some of our physical spaces, but we also know that some of the buildings like Bedford House, like South Academic, are buildings that clearly are not necessarily the best facilities that we could possibly have for our students. And so the idea of decommissioning those buildings continues to be important. And then we will have some scheduling challenges, but I'm sure between the two campuses and our online opportunities that we will be able to meet those challenges.
Are the renovations at Cowan solely for the land owned by MCC, or are we working in tandem with the National Park and City on those projects?
That's a great.
Happy to take that one, Phil.
Thank you.
So if anybody wants to see what the mishmash of a property around our footprint looks like, stop by Allie's office in Lowell. She's got it all color coded. It's a bizarre jigsaw puzzle that you'd have to see to believe, because we don't own most of the property that's around us. The city owns a good portion of it. The state Parks Department owns a chunk of it. The National Park owns a part of it. And really, the city owns the walkway and the footbridge connecting from Lower Locks over to us. So our footprint in Lowell, believe it or not, is literally our front parking lot and everything that's attached to Cowan. Once you step off those back steps into that plaza, it's no longer our property. Ditto for the walkway, which, ironically, we maintain on behalf of the city. We do the snow removal. We've done a lot of the upgrades. We've done the planting. We replace light bulbs for all of that space because it's used every single day by our population. But I will tell you this, that Phil, Allie, and myself have been in multiple conversations with the city manager and the city administration in Lowell to see if there's some opportunities here for us to consider some reimagining of at least the city-owned portions of that. The other parts get a little bit sticky because, as anybody who's heard the history of it, the folks who own the canals, it's actually the oldest corporation in the United States of America. And they own the rights and the waterways on the Eastern Canal, which is over the backside of the Cowan Center. So that footbridge that goes over it is owned by the National Park, the one that connects to the tunnel that our students and staff and faculty use to get from Cowan over to Middle Street. But Phil has also been working on a weekly basis here with the New Condo Association that owns that property where the walkway is that leads up through that tunnel up onto Prescott Street. So it is an excellent question. I wish I could provide a better answer. That the city had done an 81-page study of what's considered the Lower Locks property. They put it on a shelf and it never got implemented. And the money that was earmarked by the city got derailed by COVID and what have you. And they ended up using it for some other resources. So the canal wall upgrades and some of the safety issues that needed to be addressed there were not being taken care of. But we are trying our best to certainly take care of the property that we do have control over, including we power washed the city's gazebo and some of the walkway leading over to the Lower Locks garage a couple of weeks back. But until we actually can maybe get ownership of that space, we're fairly limited in what we can do for infrastructure upgrades.
Yeah, it's a great question. And Pat, I do want to also reemphasize the fact the tremendous job that our facility staff does. We clearly the city is not going to complain about anything that our facility staff does to clean areas that don't belong to us. And, they do an amazing job around the Cowan building and a lot of our buildings to keep the areas clean that are oftentimes not our responsibility, but certainly where a lot of our faculty and staff and students spend a lot of their time. So kudos to the facility staff for going above and beyond in doing that work. But we have had conversations, Pat said, and you know, I think it all depends on the political will and how this plays out. One of our conversations right now is about sort of that tunnelway after you come over the bridge in the back of Cowan belongs to the condo association. So while it's great that we use it as a path through to get to Middle Street and to go up to the Academic Arts Center or into the city, it doesn't belong to us. It belongs to the condo association. So we've been talking about some safety related issues in terms of lighting, flashing lights, et cetera, because that is also a point of egress for the folks that park back there in that condo association. So technically, the safest way is come out, go over the bridge, go left, follow the pathway up to the street. But that tunnel has become an integral part of our passageway. And so communicating with the condo association and making friends with them and identifying how we could partner to make that a safer passageway is something that we're currently working on. So good question, and really a challenging one, considering all the different entities that have responsibility for, you know, it's like the crosswalk going over to Federal. Yep, it was great to get the street paved, but now if we could just get the city to put the crosswalks back in so that it's safe for our students, you know, it's an ongoing daily challenge in conversations with the city manager and the city council around things in the city of Lowell. I mean, Bedford allows us a lot more autonomy in that way, but the city needs to understand that we are an important part of the function of the city of Lowell and that they have great benefit from us being there. And so we expect some maintenance and assistance from the city, both in terms of safety, lighting, and waymaking, you know, and signage, which is all part of what we've talked about in the facilities master plan. So more to come.
This kind of goes hand in hand. What is the timeline for the potential Cowan renovations?
Oh, wow. Great question. I mean, there are some things that we're probably going to do with operational dollars. So for example, we've got a roof that needs to be addressed in Cowan that's been leaking for a while. Anybody who's been to the 5th floor knows that we've got, you know, water stains, et cetera. We've got a leaky roof in Cowan that's got to be fixed. And then, of course, some of that renovation has to occur in the hallway there. I'm really excited about the possibility of what we could do with the 4th floor. We've talked about some of the floors that have not been renovated, bringing in some designers to look in how we can make better use and give our incredible ACE area a more workable floor plan as part of the 4th floor to expand some of the amazing work that they are doing and to make sure that they have the appropriate facilities for tutoring and supplemental instruction there in that building. So if I had to guess anything, I would say that probably really focusing on the roof in Cowan is going to be really important, and then looking at the utilization of the 4th floor from a redesign point of view, because as you know, the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd floors have all been renovated in terms of classroom space and in terms of the one stop on the 3rd floor. And now the idea is how do we take a serious look at the 4th floor, and most importantly, continue to really do what we need to do on the 5th floor to make sure that we can accommodate faculty office needs as well. So there's plenty to be done in Cowan. I don't know exactly how those priorities will play out, but I would tell you that the roof is going to be pretty important for us to address that very soon.
Phil, I can also tell you that some pieces are already underway and they're going to happen regardless of whether or not the bond bill funding is happening. As you know, the vestibule is is one of the, you know, intended next steps. Go ahead, Allie.
That's what I was going to say. There, you know, there's 2 pieces of this Cowan project. The one that I presented on at the beginning, which is well in the works. We, you know, someone to kind of come in between now and next summer and work on the roof in Cowan. That is an urgent project. But I also want to say I'm going to hop off after this because the audit results are in and I have to present to the board. But one of the requests we are asking the board for is to take undesignated funds in the amount of $3 million and to use them on feasibility studies. And what those do is it allows us to do project designs on some of these bigger projects that we're speaking of. And those feasibility studies, you know, it costs money to do the design before the work. And so this will help us create those quote unquote shovel ready projects that the state will be looking for when the bond bill is issued. So, you know, it all kind of, there's a lot of dominoes that kind of will work together, and we'll also always try to, you know, maintain our facilities and you know, acknowledge some of our deferred maintenance with operating funds as much as we can, as much as the budget allows. So It's all cross collaborative work, but there will be some bigger changes happening in Cowan that are planned. And then we'll see what the bond bill, where it takes us. So
Thanks, Sally.
I
Appreciate
am
you
going to
coming
hop
today.
off
Yep.
if that's okay. If anyone
I'll-
has any finance questions, always please, doors open, emails ready, send them to me. I'm happy to answer any questions you guys have.
And I'll see you over there. If I'm a few minutes late, you know that I'm here. So thanks.
Yep, thank
Thanks,
you.
Sally. A couple of questions that are in the chat that I want to grab, Caitlin, obviously, is Scott's question about will there be more classrooms converted to the HyFlex model? Well, I think there's a couple of issues there. Number one is that as we move programs around, we have had to relocate some of those HyFlex classrooms. And so therefore, we have the equipment to be able to identify a couple of additional HyFlex spaces now where classrooms had to be moved because we were moving other programs. So this movement and consolidation of programs is going to allow us to, we have to do a better job of sort of identifying where those HyFlex classrooms would be. And I would say utilization of the HyFlex classrooms are going to make a big difference about whether or not we add additional HyFlex. I think that's a conversation that has to happen with Arlene and the academic deans and the faculty. And we have to continue to look at the utilization of those spaces. I know, Scott, that you're using it, and I know that you've seen some benefit for the paralegal program, as I've seen many other people do. And I think it's a matter of just trying to align how much investment we're going to make in HyFlex depending on the needs and the demand and the utilization. The question that I see about housing is that would be a long conversation, as you well know. A while back when UMass Lowell gave up the ICC to the state and has leased it to the state for its first year to house migrants, there has always been a conversation about being the first community college in the state to have student housing. Student housing comes with its own set of challenges, legal complications, staffing, et cetera, but it also comes with some real opportunities. And so we've always expressed interest because that building is right next to us. We have amazing programs that students from across the state and maybe even across the country would certainly come and avail themselves of if they had housing. It might mean growth for us. So that idea is floated out there so that politically we have an opportunity to sit around the table as people are discussing what happens to the ICC. In fact, the Lowell plan through our intervention helped to develop a plan to identify what it would look like in terms of feasibility for us to take over the ICC. So yeah, that's an ongoing discussion. But right now, that building and that parking lot and the garage belongs to the city, but the parking lot and the building belong to the university, and they have debt on that building. And so therefore, I have no intention of taking on the university's $28 million in debt to take over the ICC. So there would have to be some conversation about how that debt relief was taken care of for the university. And that's why they are renting that facility to the state. So very soon in the next couple of months, we will see whether or not they are going to re-up their second year that to continue to have the state use it for migrant housing. So the university is receiving technically rent from the state for the use of that facility for the purpose of housing temporarily migrants that come to the state of Massachusetts. And what I will say is that, you know, there is no shortage of knowledge of our interest in that building and what happens to that building in the future, because it's part of the future of Middlesex Community College, because we are in a butter and we are so closely aligned with that and the parking garage. So housing accommodations, we have been able to continue to work with the university to provide limited amounts of housing to students that are in unique situations over on the UMass Lowell campus, to the housing that may be closest to us. So stay tuned on the housing piece in terms of that question. And yep, Valerie, you're right. It's treacherous crossing that street, and we speak with the city every day about, now that the paving is done, can you please put our crosswalks and the flashing signs back in for the safety of our students.
There's another question about the Bedford Fitness Center and if it can be opened by spring 2025.
A lot of conversation about the fitness center and a lot of past experience about the fitness center. I'm going to tell you a couple of things that may or may not surprise you. Number one, it costs money to run the fitness center. It costs personnel that need to manage it. There's liability that comes with running a fitness center. So there's a lot of conversation about whether or not we want to invest those dollars. So we are going to be receiving from the student engagement and wellness area, we'll be presenting to us sort of a budget of whether or not we will reopen the fitness center and whether or not we have the capacity and the staffing to be able to do that. The second thing I tell you is while students may question it, it's not the students that use the fitness center. It's all of our staff. Oh, and the lawyers that are over in the farmhouse. So most of the usage of the fitness center has not necessarily been by students. So maybe that's a possibility that that would change, but it would require a marketing effort to really approach that. But we know that the institution has been moving in a direction that's really important to support wellness. And so that facility, as you can see, has not been converted to anything else because there are ongoing conversations about whether or not that service would help us retain students and attract students. So whether or not it will be ready by spring 25 has a lot to do with staffing and money. And we're going to be having ongoing conversations about that in the next couple of months. So I would say, Ed, stay tuned on that one.
Well, I also know it unrelated, but folks have been asking about the temperature controls in the buildings going up and down.
Well, that's because it's 74 one day and 40 the next. I don't know what to tell you about that.
When they've shut something down, it doesn't turn back on immediately. And unfortunately, we went from some chilling temps. We were at 31 overnight or 32 overnight. And I think this weekend it's heading back up towards 80 again. So I know that people that have been showing up for events and or even in their office space, it's kind of become a running joke up on the 5th floor at Cowan. But folks are either chilling hamburger in their office or they could, they're putting on suntan lotion because it's so warm. But, we are aware of the issues. They're trying to stay on top of them as quickly as possible and regulate them as best they can. But especially in a building the size of Cowan, it doesn't just happen instantly with the flip of a switch. There's a long buildup there. So I'm just cautioning folks that, yes, we're heading into another little bit of the last couple of days of October here are giving us an October surprise of very high temps.
Yeah. I want to circle back to the fitness center because Arlene, I don't know if you had anything you wanted to add around the efforts that's been going on with student engagement and what we're learning about the fitness center and its previous use and future use.
Thanks, Phil. Just underscoring what you said, we have looked at different types of proposals, different models. The staffing is important, training the staff and the programming that would come out of it. So please stay tuned. There's, I think, a proposal in my mailbox now that we are going to review and present and get some feedback on. But it's on our radar and it is around staffing, the cost of staffing and programming. Because it's not simply someone, keeping it open. It is around how can we develop programming around that.
Jonathan, you can ask your question.
Thank you. So Phil, you were talking a little bit about this unique dynamic where we're abutting the ICC and the parking garage is owned by the city. And we've got all these different property spaces that are both unique and confusing. I wondered about, for those of us who are parking in the lower locks garage and noticing the accumulation of trash that's kind of along one of the sides of the parking garage, notably near the river, is that area, and I know there's a complexity with sort of dealing with the migrating homeless population in Lowell and just kind of how that community has kind of moved around from place to place over time. But is that area right outside the parking garage owned by the city, or is that parking garage responsibility, or yes to both? And has there been advocacy for getting that cleaned up? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting because we've been talking about parking on a number of levels. And if Allie were here, she would tell you that we've had lots of conversations with the city about parking and that particular garage. So a couple of things I think have happened, Jonathan. The grassy space with the piece of art, whether you love it or not, with the reflective piece, that's part there. That's city land. And so what is happening is there are two things that are happening. One is you are absolutely correct. We are seeing a migration of some of our homeless population down into those areas that used to be more utilized when it was the ICC for UMass Lowell. And so that is part of the activity there, but I think the city is doing the best job they can to really, as you know, and I thank you for your service to the homelessness task force and the work that the city is doing to really to try and address that. And so it is an area that needs to be cleaned up more frequently, and we've pointed that out to the city. The second part of this is, and this is probably true with all of the city's garages, but the second part is that, as you know, when there are 1,000 or more people in the ICC and they come from Haiti specifically, most of them, and there are a lot of young children that are in that facility. And what's happened is that some of the teens or older kids have sort of taken to using part of the garage that used to be spaces that were that still are owned by the university. And they're using part of the garage as what I would call it, and maybe I'll just to call it an indoor playground that's not safe for them. And we've raised that with the city as well. And we want to expect some more oversight of how that garage is used. And we've talked about the fact that that's a primary garage for our faculty and staff, and that attention needs to be paid to not only the cleanliness, but sort of the utilization of the spaces. I think some of it is part of what's happening in terms of the university not having a presence there and yet still having a significant number of designated spaces that are in that garage. The thing that's really been most troubling is that the city has come to a time when they have to pay off that garage and begin to pay it off, and it's their own bond bill for building it. And so the issue is that, they're raising rates. So for many of you who don't know, you who have passes in that garage, I think, I don't want to be incorrect, Allie might be able to tell, but it's costing us about $98 a month for you to have that parking pass in that garage. So it's not cheap. So we're trying to convince the city that if we're going to be paying at those rates, and we're going to meet some of the rate increases that they're talking about over the next 3 years, that we have expectations in terms of the cleanliness of that facility. So I promise you, is an ongoing conversation. We sent a master list at the beginning of the semester to the city manager, and issues with that parking garage were at the top of that list in terms of cleanliness and safety, and they will continue to be. So I appreciate you bringing that up, because it's an important garage for us. And in fact, it's an underutilized garage in the fact that we could actually, we could have a lot of our students parking there if we could create the kind of deal that we could and that we could use for parking. If it's not going to be used, many of the folks that are housed in the ICC do not have vehicles. And so therefore, there's a lot of empty space in that garage to be accounted for, and we certainly could use it.
Phil, if I could actually just, if I could slightly hijack this conversation for a very good announcement on behalf of the college, with relation to even what you're talking about. As folks know, we've been dealing with any number of issues with folks, especially around the Cowan Center and up by the Art Center, for some of the homeless that have some mental health issues. But we just got a phone call today from the Lowell PD that I wanted to share some news with folks, because it's a very good story, that during the NECHI visit, unbeknownst to most folks here on the call or who are in the throes of it, I know that Arlene, Matthew, and Linda were up to their eyeballs, getting these folks from point to point. But at one point, when the creditors were leaving the federal building to come to the Cowan Center, we had a homeless individual that climbed over the railing of the fence and was going to kill himself by jumping to the rocks below. Our own, where is he here? He was somewhere on the call. Dan Martin, I don't know where he went, but he was on the screen here. Went out to the bridge, got his arms around the individual, and pulled him back to safety. And we got notified today by the Lowell police that they're going to honor him Monday night at an award ceremony over at the Lowell Memorial Auditorium for a life-saving award as part of their annual awards, where they recognize members of the department. They also recognize some citizens outside. So in the midst of all the NECHI craziness, we also had a story that could have gone tragically wrong, went very well. So kudos to Dan. And I know some of the folks who had dialed 911 and helped keep the crowd at bay during that incident were integral to it. But I just wanted to let folks know that there is a nice piece of news coming along our way today. So Way to go, Dan, wherever you went. I don't see you anymore. Oh, there you are.
I don't see
Any other questions?
no more questions have come in. Shannon does have a photo of a sign about reporting cleanliness issues in the lower locks. But is unable to share on chat.
Okay, thanks for that, Shannon.
Shannon, is there a phone number that's supplied that you can throw onto the
Chat?
chat? I don't know where, I'm trying to find people here.
It's just a QR code.
Oh, okay.
So let's encourage people to, have their voices heard as individuals, and we will do so collectively as the organization dealing with the city.
That's for the canal specifically, Shannon, or is it for the river as well? Because on the left of
It's-
the Cowan is the state-owned Concord River. On the right is the privately owned Eastern Canal.
It's specifically for the lower locks garage, I believe.
Oh, perfect. Okay.
So I'll put that, I'll try to find a link and put it in the chat.
No other questions have come in.
So I want to thank you all. I feel like we've thrown a lot of information for you, some of which is very much at the state level, but incredibly important. I think you're hearing more and more about the use of fair share dollars, and I'm just really happy that the advocacy work that we are doing from the 15 community colleges is taking hold, especially with Mass Reconnect and Mass Educate, that really can support and remove financial obligations for our students. It's a very exciting time for that. But as you can see, with this opportunity for a bond bill, that the potential to use fair share dollars as a solution to deferred maintenance and additional opportunities for our students in the facilities that we currently own and what we could own in the future will be critically important to the college. And we want to keep you involved in that conversation every step of the way. So please don't hesitate to reach out to Allie, Pat, or myself around any of these projects. I also want to thank you in advance for the inconvenience. I think a lot of times as we're working on a number of these projects, either a walkway in Bedford or an area that seems to be under construction or noise that you have to hear through the process that may not necessarily be ideal is all part of the future of what we need to do to make our facilities not only as efficient, but as user-friendly and really attractive for students who are choosing Middlesex Community College. And those learning spaces and all the other spaces that our students access are going to be critically important in the future. And so this is continuing to be an investment in our future. And I appreciate all of the ideas that you all can bring to us, along with the fact that you are being tremendously patient through a number of critical projects. And I just want to say again, another shout out to the facility staff who oftentimes, even though we have third-party vendors that are coming in and working, Dan Graham and his entire team have done a remarkable job in helping support us through a number of projects and will continue to. We have just an amazing facility staff that are not only talented in what they can do, but incredibly responsive. And I think that that's part of what makes us such an amazing community is that I want you all to see the vision of the facilities master plan and what Middlesex can be in the future. And you're seeing that come to fruition over time. And all of this is going to take us some time to get there, but through your input and all of our work together, we will have better facilities for faculty, staff, and students in the future, thanks to your patience and your engagement. So thank you for being part of this conversation this afternoon. Appreciate your questions. And again, please don't hesitate to circle back with us. This recording will be available on the website, and the presentation is available for you as well. So thank you all very much and have a great afternoon.